Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the 9.2 support tier list. So if you enjoy the content, don't forget, leave a like and subscribe. It does help other people find it. Lets you know whenever I release new content as well. If you haven't checked out my patch notes, go ahead and check that out. We'll be referencing those patch notes as we go through the support tier list. I don't think there's that much that's shaken up the support tier list. Rakan is probably the most influential one, but we'll go through it as we work our way through this. Now, really quickly as well, I've had a bunch of people just asking me about, like, what's going on with the ranked new season, you know, what do I think about it, all of this. So just really quickly, they have an overview here on the patch notes itself. I encourage you to just go through and just look. It says position ranks explained, position ranks in action. They're really short videos. They're like less than 5 minutes. It'll explain everything that goes on there. The TLDR is just be prepared to be at a much lower rank. So if you start, or if you finished in Silver 4, you're likely going to start in Bronze 4 and have to work your way back up. That's normal. Happens to everybody. They do that to keep accounts honest so that, you know, someone who hasn't played in like 9 months is going to have to, you know, re-queue and practice and play again. So they can't just sit on their rank. And you're getting ranked based on your position now as well. So whenever you play a support game, you will have a different support rank than if you play mid lane. You'll have a different mid rank. And they explain that in those videos. They talk about how they affect each other a little bit through this mechanism called splashing. Just basically play the role that you're most comfortable with. You know, play good champions, try to climb. It's going to be pretty much the same deal. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here and talk about some of these supports. All right, so like I said, it hasn't really shaken up too much, but we'll go through sort of the top champions here. I think that Zyra, and I'm doing the same format as last time too. I'm just doing top 5 for Iron through Silver, top 5 Gold through Plat, then top 5 for Organized Play. I'll explain these a little bit. I'll talk about a couple honorable mentions, and then I'll talk about a few that people have asked me about throughout the week. Like I've had people asking me about Orange support. I've had people asking me about you know, stuff like Veigar support, Teemo support, because I know there are some other content creators that occasionally like mention these types of champions. And so I'll touch on them briefly kind of near the end of the video. But let's go over the top 5 first. So I think Zyra is still going to be number 1, kind of Iron through Silver bracket. They did lower her mana per 5, but you have to keep in mind that she had 15 mana per 5, which is higher than, I think that's the highest in the game. So they gave her that a long time ago. I'm not really sure, like, what's up with that. I think that was a compensatory buff because they nerfed her plant AI like earlier last year. So she still has 13 mana per 5, which is just ridiculous. If you think about a lot of other mages, like Orianna has 8 mana per 5. Even people like Janna are going to have like 11 mana per 5. So for some reason, she has the most. And also the way her trading pattern works in lane, you just don't really chew through your mana that much because you're usually waiting on a plant to trade. Just doing a Q by itself is pretty inefficient. I mean, at level 1, it's 70 mana for 60 damage, which is terrible. Now, it is only 70 mana the entire time, so if you get to rank 3, it's 70 mana for 130 damage, but that's still, like, really bad, and it only has a 0.6 ratio, so it does, like, very, very little damage unless you have a plant. Well, you need your plants, and they take 20 seconds at level 1, so that means that you're only able to, like, start casting some of your spells and harassing once every 20 seconds, and if you're getting 13 mana per 5, you know, that's going to be, what, 52 mana that you're getting every time you cast a Q on one of these, and it's only costing you 17 mana, so you're only really going into a deficit of, like, if you do that trading pattern of, like, 18 mana or so every 20 seconds. So you can last quite a long time with this. And then she's just really good. I mean, I've talked about Zyra a lot overall, but there's a few reasons why she's very strong. Number 1, she does a lot of damage. Like I just said, the Q doesn't do that much, but these plants do a lot if you think about how often they actually hit people. So, you know, this thing usually hits somebody at least twice early on. So that's going to be, you know, somewhere between 60 to 70 damage on top of this, right? So now that starts to get interesting. Now you're looking at like 130 damage at level 2 whenever you hit somebody with these plants. And that doesn't include if you do Comet or Dark Harvest or Electrocute or whatever, and you start triggering those things, then you can get even more damage in there. So those plants do quite a bit of damage. She can harass and do her all-in through minion waves. That's a huge deal. So it really doesn't matter how the wave is positioned. You know, you can Q her ass, you can E her ass, you can ult through the wave. This is different from some of the other champions like Brand, who has to have a clear shot to land his Q. He can't Q through minions. Or like Thresh or Blitzcrank, who can't, you know, use their engages through minions. Zyra can. So that means that she's always a threat. You have to constantly be careful if she's playing up on you in the lane. And so she's just super, super oppressive for that reason, because she's always a threat. She has really nice wave clear with her E, if you max your E first, which you should. So, you know, if the wave's coming down, you're trying to push them in a tower, you know, you can use your E, do a lot of damage to it. Or if you just get a kill, you can use your E, you know, wave clear really quickly. Or for some reason, you're just stranded mid lane trying to hold it while the rest of your team is running around, you know, in the Clown Fiesta, and you're trying to hold it against 1 or 2 people, you can use your E to wave clear. So wave clear is very handy. Zyra's great at it. And then you can also use your plants for vision. I do this a lot on the stream, and a lot of people just don't think to do this. But remember, the seed range is 850, and the Q range is 800. So you can put one of these seeds in a bush, for example, and use your Q to spawn it. It sees through even a control ward. So you can get full vision of an area while you're trying to clear out that control ward, which is really handy for the tri-bush in the bot lane. And that means you don't have to waste a ward on it as well. So if you're trying to move your ward line forward, so if you're like trying to, you know, press forward and try to ward Baron, usually you would have to keep dropping wards as you go to make sure that it's safe so that you can keep stepping up and moving your wards forward. With Zyra, you don't have to do that. So you can just keep spawning plants as you move your vision forward, and then you don't run out of wards as much, and you're better prepared if you do get into a ward war where you're trying to clear, you know, clear wards and keep placing wards while other people are sweeping them. So very, very powerful, very useful. Now, Oblivion Orb also got nerfed a little bit on this patch. I think it's still something you'll want to rush as Zyra. If you're really rich, you can get Leandries instead. Basically, Oblivion Orb is a lot better for all-in single target burst, and then Leandries is going to be much better for poke and team fights. But both very, very good options. So she applies a lot of pressure. She has a big auto attack range of 575, so it's pretty easy to sneak in autos as well. Pushes really well. She's just super dangerous. You know, if you get ganked, it's really hard to get out of it. Usually your only real option is just hope that you have some plants available with your W, and you just turn around and blow up the person who's ganking you, which is totally possible as Zyra. So typically, if you don't know where the jungler is, especially, and you're trying to push up a little bit, you want to always make sure you have one plant in your back pocket just in case they come in and you're going to have to fight. So that's helpful. You know, super lane oppressive, excellent at team fights, excellent at, you know, one-on-one assassination, tons of damage, great utility, but she can be ganked. She can be flanked and murdered by assassins in the mid game, so, you know, be careful about that. Now, the runes that I like to use are Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, and then Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace. You can't get a lot of CDR with your main build because you're just going to have to get Sorcery Boots and then usually Morellonomicon and Leandries, or if you go something like Leandries Rylai's. Either way, you're not getting any CDR. And CDR is very, very good on her because you want plants up as much as possible, and you have a really high impact ult, so you want that as much as possible as well. So I think that Presence of Mind is really huge for that. In a lot of team fights, you're going to get at least 2 kills or assists. So it's basically like having 20% CDR in the mid to late game, which is handy. The mana doesn't always matter, but sometimes it does. And then Coup de Grace is excellent as well. Gives you 7% damage, helps you execute people. It makes Dark Harvest do more damage when they're below a certain threshold of health, so that's handy. And, you know, even after the Dark Harvest nerfs, if you get resets on Dark Harvest, so if you get 1 kill in a fight and then there's a reset and another kill in a fight, that's almost always going to be more damage than Electrocute over time. And it's certainly going to be more damage than Comet a lot of times. Now, you can go Comet if you want to. Comet itself is pretty good. Your plant hits do reduce the cooldown on Comet, which is really handy. I thought I had the runes up here, but let me go ahead and pull the runes up. Problem is you still don't need Mana Flow Band. It's a little more helpful now that you had a couple of your mana knocked off, but it's still not entirely necessary. But, you know, Comet does decent damage. You might get a couple of Comets in a team fight as well, but I'm pretty sure the Dark Harvest is going to do more. So what is this? It's 30 to 100 with 20%. Then Dark Harvest is going to be 20 to 60, but it's 5 per soul. A lot of times, you know, you can have at least 5 souls, if not more, in the mid game. So it's really closer to something like 45 to, or like, yeah, 45 to 85 with 15% AP. So they did nerf it a while back. But I still think that it's really good. So it's debatable. You can go something like Electrocute if you want to. But I think if you have a reasonable amount of souls, you know, in the mid game, even at least like 5 to 10, I still think that's going to be worth it. If you have 10, it's definitely worth it. That's going to give you 70 to 110 damage. So if you trigger that twice, that's like 80 times 2, you know, if you're like level 11 or so, it's like 160 damage, which is nice. Versus, you know, if you trigger this twice, it's going to be close. It's going to be like 120 damage. You know, in a fight. They can dodge this, though. They can't dodge Dark Harvest. And Electrocute is usually just going to be a one-time thing in a fight, so it can get pretty close to that, you know, whatever I said, at 130 or so. But I still like Dark Harvest. I think it's consistent. I like the poke that it puts out in lane. It's just so easy to trigger it and to get those stacks with a plant. You know, if someone's just hanging out under their tower and they're kind of in the red zone, and you just want to trigger that Dark Harvest on them and get those stacks going, you can just drop a Q plant in there. It'll throw one little spitter at them, trigger it, boom, easy. So she's one of the easiest champs in the game to stack Dark Harvest with. So I think that's good. And then I really like having the combination of Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. This just gives you some very much needed heal in the laning phase. You can trigger this off of your plants. So remember, it's damaging any champion. Doesn't have to be auto attacks. And so, you know, the long range of your Q plants means that you're always going to be triggering this. Same thing with Ravenous Hunter. You can even, when you throw your E down a minion wave, you're going to get a ton of extra lifesteal off of that. So really handy. You can do Ultimate Hunter if you want to. You know, her ultimate is very strong, like I said before. But I think the safer is just Ravenous Hunter. Just having that extra sustain is a really big deal. And then I always just like going Eyeball Collection as well. This gives you some nice scaling kind of later on into the game. And I think that's good, especially since they just nerfed Absolute Focus. So, like, if you compare this to the Sorcery Tree, you know, you get Comet, which is pretty good. I think Dark Harvest is a little better, but they're similar. Mana Flow Band's the only useful one here. You don't need it. You're already going to have a ton of mana. You're basically an all-in champion in the mid-game anyways. Transcendence is okay. 10% CDR is good. Absolute Focus was super good, but then this patch nerfed it a little bit. It's still okay. And then Gathering Storm has been nerfed. It's all right. Scorch has been nerfed. It's okay. You can trigger Scorch pretty often. You know, Sorcery's okay. You can definitely go Sorcery, but whatever you do, your secondary has to be, I think, Bone Plating, and then whatever else you want. But you need that safety from Bone Plating. If you're against a heavy poke, I guess you could go Second Wind as well. But Bone Plating just saves you so much in a lot of all-ins in the bot lane. Demolish is pretty good too for taking towers, so I almost always go something like, you know, Bone Plating plus Demolish. Other options, I guess you could do something like Cosmic Insight, Magical Footwear. It's also pretty good in some matchups. That's the super greedy build, but that'll help you get to your Sorcerer boots a lot faster. And then Cosmic Insight's going to give you some of that much needed CDR. So Zyra, very strong. Then you just want to build, you know, like I said, your double pin items and Leandres usually. Okay. So Zyra is good. You notice Zyra is what I think is the best for Iron to Silver and Gold to Platinum. So she's in both of them. Very strong champ. Brands did get nerfed on this patch. I still think he's going to be good, especially in kind of the Iron bracket. I think Zyra is better, but you're just going to be able to hit a lot of skill shots in Iron to Silver. People aren't going to dodge your Ws as well or your Qs, and so if you're landing your skill shots, Brand just feels amazing. Also, in like a team fight, you know, if you get focused out, you know, people just charge at you, you can almost always just press R and you still do a ton of damage because everyone's going to be grouped up. It's going to be less likely that people spread out. So I think that I think it's still going to be pretty strong. Same deal with Zyra. You know, you might have to get like a Fairy Charm or something to keep up, but you can just sell that back later. I call that renting a Fairy Charm. So basically you buy it for 125, then you sell it back for 88 later. It's just 37 gold to apply a lot more pressure to the laning phase. So yeah, you might have to buy an extra Fairy Charm in there because you don't have the same kind of regen as Zyra, but I would not go like all in and buy something like a Luden's Echo. It's just too much of a waste. You really just want to go towards the double pin items, Oblivion Orb, Sorcerer's Shoes, you know, get your Watchers, get your Wards, and then after that, I would probably start working either a Leandri's or a Rylai's. Rylai's is pretty good on him, just because it's going to ensure that people are going to be slowed, and it's more likely you're going to hit your Q. But Leandri's is super broken on him because each one of your dot ticks is going to refresh the Leandri's, so you're going to get a lot of extra burn damage out of that. So I'd probably go Leandri's second. If you're super rich, kind of like Zyra, you might be able to skip the Oblivion Orb and just go to Leandri's if you kind of get to the team fight stage really quickly. Like you're just kind of blowing through their towers, taking all the dragons, and you're just trying to close out. Okay, Sona's another one that I think is going to be really strong. She does get a little bit better because they nerfed Oblivion Orb and they nerfed Ignite, which are what, you know, a lot of the more aggressive supports are going to take in the laning phase. So that's going to give her a little bit of a better game against, you know, champions like Zyra, champions like Bran. She's just super consistent. You know, her only skill shot is her ult. Everything else is just, you know, press Q, press W, and just auto attack a lot most of the time. So she can get blown up early, but if you do get to your core items, if you get to that Ardent Censer plus Athene's Unholy Grail, then it's really, really hard to deal with you. So basically, the better team fights are in a meta, the better Sona's going to be, is what it comes down to. So, you know, watch her over the next couple of patches. If we see tanks start to come back, if they buff tank items just a little bit more, and we start seeing the return, we're starting to see some more Sejuanis and things like that. If we see some more like Sejuanis become viable, or, you know, more top lane Malakais or top lane Mundos or something like that, she's going to get a lot better. So when people are grouped up, they're getting, you know, you're getting more healing with your auras, you're doing more damage with your auras, they're going to be clumped up for your ultimates, you can stun a lot of people. So she's really just the queen of team fights. So we're still kind of in a meta where everyone is just like playing super high damage, squishy champions and just kind of running at each other randomly in the jungle. And so she's not as good at that. She's not as good at the Clown Fiesta. It's because like her abilities just aren't very well suited for that. She's squishy. She can get caught out and killed. She has no mobility. You know, her abilities in very small like circumstances like 2-on-2 are not as good as like 5-on-5, so she's there, but she's almost always has a really high win rate. You know, she has the highest win rate right now. I think, where did I put this at? Silver. Highest win rate by 2% in silver. Pretty good pick rate, so she's just super, super consistent. It's very tough to mess up on her, and she has really, really high scaling because of how her W interacts with Ardent Censer and Athene's. I do have an entire guide for Sona, so be sure to watch it on the channel. It's obviously from season 8, but you know, nothing much has changed in terms of itemization, how you play her, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. I think she's a very, very good champion, especially if you're auto-filled or newer to the game and you're just looking to play something to get some wins. She's great. But you know, even if you're really experienced and you just want some wins, you know, Sona can be very strong. Alright, next, Soraka. So I think Soraka is definitely getting a bit better on this patch because they nerfed Ignite and they nerfed Oblivion Orb and Morellonomicon. So there is a chance that not as many mid laners are going to get Morellonomicon. I'm not saying that that's actually going to happen. I think a lot of people will still get it. Oblivion Orb is still a really strong item. And once people get Oblivion Orb and they see a Soraka, you know, they're probably going to think, you know, I've already bought half the item. I might as well go ahead and finish the Morellonomicon. So that's an issue. And the fact that Zyra and Brand are both super good right now and pretty popular, and they get Oblivion Orb, and they can get Morellos, that's still going to be problematic. But there's going to be a little bit less of that just because, excuse me, just because it's a little bit more expensive. Maybe people try out different stuff. Maybe people get baited, and you know, maybe they think, oh, you know, Oblivion Orb's too expensive, I'm gonna get Rylai's first, or I'm gonna get Haunting Guys first, or something like that, and then maybe you don't get those grievous wounds as much. So you know, we'll see how it goes. She's also a great lane bully. I think lane bullies are good right now. You're starting to see some tanks kind of come back into the meta, kind of like Sona. She's best in sort of a tank meta where you can run around and heal people, and you have a nice front line to protect you. They get great scaling because they have a ton of armor and magic resist, and the way that your plus health works with that. If you don't know how that works, I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but basically, if somebody has 100 armor, you heal them for 100 health, it's going to take 200 physical damage to remove that 100 health because the armor is going to, reduce the damage by 50% at that point. So that makes healing especially powerful. So if you're healing people that have 100 armor, 200 armor, that type of stuff, instead of healing people that have like 50 armor, like squishy mages, that makes your healing much, much more effective. Okay. So yeah, she's still going to be pretty strong. Veigar is one that I'm going to put up here. I have seen some Veigar support, even in like Platinum, even in Low Diamond. It can be effective. I don't like it up that far just because I think it's super vulnerable to ganks, to all-ins, if people have engages. Now, the cage is nice. It's a very good team fighting tool. There's a lot of stuns. It can really hose champions like Vayne if they don't get a Quicksilver Sash. Obviously not going to be as good against something like an Ezreal or just some other champion that can blink through. But anyone that has to dash, that relies a lot on their mobility, stuff like Ahri, Rakan, Lucian, Vayne, a lot of those champions are going to have a hard time against Veigar. You just have to be careful that you don't get all-in and murdered. So do not pick Veigar into something like a Leona or Alistar or stuff like that, because that can be a nightmare. But if you do get to stack up, you hit some of your Qs in the laning phase, you want to level up your stun, I would go for like 3 points of Q in the laning phase and then max your stun for team fights in the mid game. Then I think you can be really strong, and I would just go for the dual pen items, just the standard Oblivion Orb, Sork Shoes. Then after that, you can kind of choose. Look how much how much MR they're getting, magic resist. You could go Void Staff. You could also go Twin Shadows. I think is really nice on him. It gives him some movement speed to help you out a ton. It gives you the CDR that you desperately need because none of your items are going to have CDR. I wouldn't recommend getting like a Ludens or a mana item. I mean, I guess you could do it. It's going to lower your damage by quite a bit. And as an all-in mage, I just don't think that you need that much mana, like you're not going to be sitting there farming a side lane the whole time, or you shouldn't be as a support as you might like a mid lane or something like that. So I'm just not sure that getting a mana item is entirely necessary, but if you feel like you need one, you can get it. You are going to have some mana regen from your gold generation item. You can rent a Fairy Charm like I talked about with Zyra or Brand if you need to early, but I just wouldn't commit the full, 3,200 gold to Ludens. It's just too much to spend on mana. You're spending like 800 gold on mana, and as a support, that's just too much. And your spells are pretty inexpensive, right? It's only 50 if you just keep this at level 3 and spam it. Dark Matter's relatively cheap. Your shield or your stun starts to get a bit more expensive, but I think it's definitely manageable. And yeah, so he's squishy, but what was I was gonna get Twin Shadows here just to show you the stats on that. So it gives you movement speed, it gives you AP. It has a nice tool, which this is actually pretty good. I mean, you can get something like this even on Zyra as like a 3rd or 4th item if you really want to. I still think it's better to get like Leandries on Zyra and Brand, but because Veigar does all of his damage up front, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to get Leandries because you're not going to be poking that much. You're just going to be one-shotting people. And so I think that this is really handy for that. It's actually not like super cost efficient though, so I don't know. Maybe Shirelia's maybe they increased the price on Twin Shadows and I wasn't paying attention. This is a little more gold efficient, so maybe Shirelia's would make a bit more sense. You still get the ability power, you get the movement speed, and you have the active to speed everyone else up. I don't know. This has 70 ability power and 10% cooldown and movement speed. Like, the reason this is so useful is like those ghosts help you scout the jungle or like scout the Baron pit because you don't have anything to really check that. Like, you can spam a W from like long distance, and maybe you hit somebody or like a Q and see if you hit people in the bush. But you don't have a really good way to get vision of bushes. I don't believe the wall gives vision. It might. But this will certainly help you keep track of people. It helps you slow people down so you can catch them in the cage. So I think this is a pretty good item. I wouldn't rush it. You know, like I said, I'd go for the double pin items first, but this is an option you could get as like a third item that could be all right. And then I would just go the standard Comet, Mana Flow, Transcendence, Gathering Storm, and then just Demolish and Bone Plating. So, decent support. And, you know, there are other AP supports that could work here too. You know, if you just really want to pressure the lane and you're pretty confident you're not going to get killed by the jungler, either they have a fairly weak jungler that's not going to gank you a lot early, like maybe Master Yi or Shyvana, or maybe you know you have a really strong jungler. Either way, like these AP supports, especially something like Veigar, these off-meta ones, are really dependent on like not getting camped by the jungler. But you could play stuff like, I think Veigar is probably the best of kind of that off-meta crew. You could also play things like Xerath or Lux or Vel'Koz. They're all the same type of thing. Just like push them in a tower over and over again, spam your abilities, and just hope that the jungler doesn't gank you. Veigar's a little bit better about that because he has some really good teamfight presence with that stun. Is a really, really big deal. And that's something that some of those other high poke champions don't have, but his range is much shorter. So he's not going to be like just tremendously poking them under lane as something like a Xerath might. But anyways, that's it for Iron to Silver. Now, as far as Gold to Platinum, I already talked about Zyra. She's still going to be pretty good there. It's going to be a bit harder to hit your E's on people, but you should still be able to get Q plants on them. You can start, you know, bushing people using control wards and hiding in bushes and just one-shotting them. So I think she's still really good at that bracket. Nami is another one that I brought in here as kind of a substitute for Sona. I think Nami's just a little bit harder to play, but I think that she's safer and more versatile because her heal is 725 range, whereas Sona's shield, like Sona's heal is pretty far, but her shield is like 450 range. All of her auras are, so you have to get really close to combat, and she's very reliant on a lot of people being stacked up. Whereas Nami's actually pretty good at skirmishing. And the key thing with Nami as well is that like her E really dictates the tempo of the fight a lot of times because it's a slow that auto attacks apply over and over and over again. So if you put this on like a Vayne who's trying to run somebody down, it's going to give them the Nami passive, which is going to speed her up. And for 3 auto attacks, it's going to slow them down quite a bit. So the slow is going to last like 2 to 3 seconds while those auto attacks are going on. So that's part of what makes her really good, and it's a pretty nice range too. So there's 800 range, 725. This is great for harassment in the laning phase too, because you can just walk up, W somebody, auto attack, and not only does it do damage, but it also heals you all for 1 mana cost, which is great. Whereas with Sona, for example, you have to use your Q to harass, then you have to use your W to heal if you want. This does it on the same thing. The Aqua Prison, obviously super strong. It's a hard stun. If you land it, can hit multiple targets. Just very good. Tidecaller's Blessing, I already talked about that. Particularly good with champions like Lucian, because Lucian, each one of his double shots will trigger one of these. So that's some nice bonus damage there. And then Vayne, just because she really likes movement speed. She really likes, you know, kiting people or chasing them down. She's all about that mobility. And so Tidecallers is great because you get the speed off the passive and you get the slow off the auto attacks. And then, of course, your Tidal Wave is awesome, too. Not only does it slow people, but it also knocks them up temporarily. So if Rakan's trying to engage into you, or Zack's trying to run into you, or Sejuani, or a Mumu, or your Thresh, or whatever, you can just Tidal Wave, and it'll knock them out of whatever they're doing, in addition to slowing them. So that's really nice. And this is very good as a follow-up engage, too. So if you have someone else on your team that can start a fight, you know, a Jarvan, or an Ornn, or an Amumu, or whatever, then that's perfect for this because it's pretty slow moving. So a lot of people can just kind of walk out of the way. So you have to be very careful where you aim it. But overall, can be a very strong ability. So I think she's great. It's going to be similar items to Sona. You're going to be running Ardent Censer, and then I think Athene's Unholy Grail is really great after that. And then if you do get to like kind of the late game, you can get Redemption as well. You just want to go with the standard harass package of Airy, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Water Walking, and then Bone Plating and Revitalize. You can get something else other than Water Walking. If you really want to get Scorch and pressure them early, you can do that. I wouldn't recommend doing Gathering Storm. It's just going to be a bit too late. And absolute focus, I think, is still something that you want because you do damage and you heal yourself while you're doing that. So you should be able to stay over 70%. You could also go something like Transcendence if you want to. So yeah, I think she's going to be really good. Pyke is going to be another one that I'm introducing here. So they did nerf Rakan a little bit. So getting a different kind of initiation champ could be a good thing. And if you snowball hard with Pyke, then he can definitely take over games. He generates a lot of extra gold for his team because, you know, he gets the damage off the kill, and then they also get the damage. So you basically get an extra 50% damage or 50% gold on kills. So, like, if a normal kill, you know, would give 300 gold, or I guess an extra 30%, like 1/3. So a kill would normally give like 300 gold, and then whoever gets the assist would get 150 gold. It can be split among however many people get the assist, but it's 450 gold. If you get the kill and then someone else gets the assist, they get that full gold value. So now instead of getting 450, you get 600 gold. So it's about 1/3 more gold that you generate off of kills if you're using your ult to secure them, which is nice. And yeah, I mean, he's pretty good. You know, he has lots of sustain in lane with his passive. He can land stuns and hooks with his bone skewer. He can go invisible and sneak up on people to get kills. That's also a great escape with his ghost water dive. You know, he's got a dash that can go over walls. It's like instant. So he has so many different like sneaky ways where he can maneuver in and out of the fight. Kind of like Rakan, not as mobile as Rakan, but still pretty good. Then, of course, the death from below for the execute is great, particularly against squishy targets who get down that low in health. Now, remember that his tank build, which was really oppressive and really good, has been nerfed quite a bit, so you're really highly incentivized to go lethality, which means your items are going to be a lot more expensive. You're going to be buying like 2,900 gold items instead of, you know, the 2,100 gold items that a lot of the supports will get. So if you don't get those kills, you can fall behind, and you can get outscaled. But if you do, he can be great. It's a strong champ. You still want to go Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Revitalize, and then Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace. And you want to do Mobility Boots, Targon, Dustblade, Ghostblade, and Edge of Night. If you can afford all that. Okay, and then next up we have Rakan. So I do think that Rakan is still going to be top 5 for gold to plat. It feels pretty bad to try to use his W, and it did get, for those of you that didn't read the patch notes, his W has been slowed a lot. I played him a decent chunk, both yesterday and the day before, on the new patch, and it feels really bad at max range. It feels like it's a lot slower, but at close range, it's really not that bad. Even at medium range, like, you can still get it off because they lowered the amount of like wind-up for it by 0.15. So it really, you only feel the difference if you're kind of going for that max range. And most people are still not going to dodge. If you have R plus W, they're still not going to dodge it. So, you know, some people will still dodge a normal W. A lot of people dodged his normal W anyways. It's that R plus W. So we'll see. But if you look at like a lot of situations, or at least when I do in my games, you know, you'll often like E over to somebody, like someone else who's initiating, like your Lee Sin's going in, or your Sejuani, or your Riven's flanking, or whatever. A lot of times you'll E over to them and then R W at a much closer range. You can also R flash and then W if you want to. So there are ways to work around it, and this is the good old-fashioned R plus W can still hit people, which is nice. So I think he's still going to be great. I mean, the Q is decent in lane. I mean, the heal doesn't look like much, but if you add up everything that Q does, it's actually pretty good. It does damage, it heals you, and it heals one other person. It can potentially heal multiple people when you're doing something like Baron, but in the laning phase, it usually just heals you and your partner. Let's see. There we go. Well, I was blanking out there for a second. But yeah, it's only 60 mana, Then I usually like to get 3 points of this for the laning phase, so going up to 160 with a 0.6 ratio, and then, you know, at level 5, it's going to heal you for 42 and your ally for 42. So it basically heals for 82. Let's see. Basically heals for 82 and does 160 damage. So that's pretty decent. It's pretty decent. It's the weakest part of his kit, but it's pretty decent. And then this is still going to be good, you know, for the most part. It is going to look awkward and feel awkward if you played Rakan a lot, but it's still going to be nice. You can still escape with it. It's okay engage. His E is still amazing. Don't forget you get 2 of these, so you get a 280 shield with, you know, basically a 1.6 ratio on it. And then your R is still going to be very good for team fights, very good for initiation. So I still think he's going to be strong, particularly with the Zeke's plus Knight's Vow build, plus Guardian. But we'll see. There's going to be a lot of people out there saying he's unviable, he's trash, you can't play him anymore. Statistically, if you look at him over 9.2, he's not really gone down that much. You know, he's 47%. I guess over the last couple of days. Okay, he has gone down quite a bit. Do what? Bye. Love you. Maybe he has gone down a little bit over the next couple of days. Jesus. But that is a fairly small sample size, and people just may not be used to it yet. 25% is, that's pretty shocking. So I don't know. Maybe I'm on my own out here, but I played him. I thought it was okay. I went 50-50 with him. It's obviously a nerf, but I think you can still make him work. The main thing about Rakan is, like, I think he's one of the best champs at playing around anyone on your team. So if your AD carry feeds, you know, or they just don't know what they're doing, but your mid laner's great, you can go roam to mid lane, make plays around them. You can go to your jungle, make plays around them. Like, you can just rotate around the map and just navigate so many different situations so well. The fact that you can get so much armor, you know, off of your Zekes and off of your, you know, Knight's Vow fairly early on is very helpful against a lot of assassins out there, against a lot of these skirmishers and fighters, because a lot of them are AD. You can have the option of getting some more magic resist if you want. You can get things like a locket down the line, but I still think he's super versatile. He's my go-to. Okay, I'm worried that, you know, my AD carry might be a chimp. So I'm going to play Rakan. And if they aren't a chimp, he's still really good. You know, you can still go Zekes. If you have that Vayne that's just totally popping off and they don't really have that much damage on your team, you could go Ardent Censer after that. He does love all those stats. AP is very good on him. You know, movement speed's good on him. The Ardent Censer buff you can apply to 2 different people easily with your E. So Ardent Censer is good. You just don't want to get blown up. But I still think he's good. So, you know, a lot of people might disagree, but I think that he's great. And then the build on him is going to be Guardian, Demolish, Bone Plating, Revitalize, and then Nimbus Cloak and Water Walking. My 2 favorites. Then I like going Nomad's Medallion, Mobility Boots, Zeke, Knight's Vow, and Shirelia's. So there are other things you can get. I mentioned Ardent. You could get a Shirelia's, you know, after Zeke's. I still think that Zeke's is probably the #1 item you have to get. It's just so insanely good on him. It just gives him a lot of armor, which he desperately needs. It scales so well with his shield and with Guardian, having that extra armor to make those things even more effective. And then the fact that, like, your ult allows you to start a fight and hold people in place with the slow off of that and the damage that you do off of the Zeke. So I think it's just a perfect combination for him. I've tried other stuff. That's what I always end up going back to. And then finally, Thresh. If you're really good on Thresh, you can make him work. You know, you just got to land those hooks. You got to land those flays. He does have outplay potential, but if you don't do it, then he's just completely worthless. If you're missing all of your hooks, you're not flaying at the right time, he's the hardest support in the game to play. Another thing to keep in mind is that people are going to expect you to be awesome if you play Thresh, basically, because people have seen all these montage videos with Thresh. They've seen a lot of pro players playing Thresh. And so if you're just a normal person that just throws some hooks and misses them, you know, a lot, or you just flay a little bit late, or you don't flay at all because you're not used to it, or you just throw the lantern in the wrong spot or whatever, people are going to question mark ping you relentlessly, and it's going to hurt the sort of the mentality of your team, because people just scrutinize Thresh play more than anything else. I don't know why. People are always looking for excuses for why like plays go wrong, and Thresh, like everything about him is very visible. There's no hidden power in his kit. Right, like it's obvious when you miss a hook. It's obvious when you screw up a flay. It's obvious, you know, when you don't throw the lantern out, or when you throw it in a bad spot or whatever. That's all super obvious. So, you know, that's different from something like a Sona or a Janna, where people may not necessarily know if you're not playing her in an optimal way. You know, like you might miss your tornado. Some people might notice that, or like you can whiff your ult on Sona. That's totally possible. But you're just not going to catch as much hell on those champions as you will on Thresh if you miss stuff. So you can mute all, but it is something that can cause some mental stress for people on your team as well. So just be prepared. If you want to play a lot of Thresh, he's really hard to learn, but he is very rewarding, and you're going to have to sift through some haters if you want to do it. Okay, now top 5 for organized play. I still think that Rakan is going to be number 1. Or one of the top ones if he's not number 1. If you look at how much he was picked here, you know, he was picked 13 times and banned 21 times out of 47 games. So that's 34 games out of 47 he was picked or banned, which is a huge presence. I think that's more than any other support in terms of presence. Yeah, Braum only had 21 presence. Alistar had 30, which is still pretty good. Thresh had 20, but it's basically Rakan and then Alistar were the most played. Now, it's totally possible that Alistar could just completely replace Rakan, and just everybody runs Alistar now instead of Rakan after those changes. And then maybe Alistar starts getting banned a lot more. We'll see. But, you know, Rakan had a much higher win rate here. Looks like he won probably 11 out of those 13 games, whereas Alistar looks like he won like 9 out of those 20 or so of those games. So, obviously, this is on 9.1. This is before the nerfs. But I still think Rakan will be good for the reasons I just mentioned. I still think he has really reliable engage. Great thing about Rakan, too, is if you go in and then the situation gets dangerous and you need to escape, you can always get back out with your E. Well, not always if they CC you, but it's a lot easier to get out with Rakan after you go in than any other hard engaged champion. So, that's another thing that makes him really useful, especially in solo queue when people may not be on board, you know, with what you're trying to do. It's like no one follows up on your ult plus W. Okay, you just E, get back out, no problem. No one follows up on your WQ combo as Alistar. Okay, you die. Pretty much. So I expect to see him there. Now, Alistar is another one that's really far up there. So you might be wondering, well, why is Alistar like this far up, but he's nowhere to be seen on the top 4 videos? In fact, why are all of these champions, except for Rakan, tanks, but you never see tanks on like a top list here, at least kind of in the modern era? There's a couple reasons for that. Number 1 is tanks require a lot more team coordination, because like I just mentioned, in solo queue, if you're Alistar and you go in and no one follows you, you're going to die. So people have to be on your page. Whereas with Zyra, you hit somebody with some roots, you just kill them yourself. Or Brand, you just kill them yourself. Nami, you're just hanging out and disrupting. You're not putting yourself in danger most of the time. Same thing with Sona, Soraka, Pyke or Thresh. You miss your hook, okay, whatever. Just reset, wait till it's off cooldown again. But these are all like close, except for Thresh. He obviously has that overlap there. But like these champions are all up close and personal for the most part. Like if you don't have coordination, then you're just going to get caught out and die a lot if you play those champs. Also, the economy in pro play is like bankrupt basically for supports. You can't get any items. You're basically going to get, you have to rush a tier 3 ward item, the Eye of the Equinox. Then you get your tier 2 boots, usually mobility boots. And then you buy a bunch of control wards. That's what you get in pro play. You might, if your team, if it's a real bloodbath, you might be able to complete something like a Zeke's or maybe a Knight's Vow. Very rarely both, and definitely not more than those two in a lot of games, because there's just not as many deaths. You know, a pro game, the final score might be like 10-10. You know, a silver game, it's going to be 50-50. And so that means that champions that scale super well with items like Sona, mostly like the AP enchanter types, the Sonas, the the Jannas, the Sorakas, all of that, they're going to be much better at lower elos because there's just a lot more money going around. That's a huge part of it as well. And they don't have to fully commit to fights a lot of times. So if it's going south, you know, you're not going to die. You're not going to go down with the ship most of the time. So that's a couple of things. And then also, like, the pro meta, usually they'll have, you know, a tank somewhere, either in the jungle or top lane. But a lot of times, some team comps don't. You know, you might see a Camille in the jungle, and then top lane, like Urgot or something that's kind of a tank, you know, but not fully, like a bruisery sort of thing. OP, whatever Urgot is. But usually the support, like, really needs to be someone who can start a fight a lot of times. And so that's why, like, Rakan, Alistar are, like, the two premier ones that you see all the time now. And then someone like Thresh can do it too. Braum is just very good at team fights if you have a huge team fight comp. He can be very strong. But that's part of that. That's like all boils into why Alistar is really good. He operates super well on virtually no gold. His WQ combo always works no matter what. He doesn't need gold to be tanky. He just presses R and like nothing kills him for 5 seconds. That means he can tower dive super early. Well, not super early, but like level 6, like no problem. Tower dive. And like doesn't have to worry about his positioning and safety as much when he just gets that engage. You just need to get the engage, start your trample, you know, land your auto attack to stun somebody, and that's it. Alistar also has a little bit more utility as well. Like if you have a Yasuo on your team, obviously like that knockup's nice. You don't see that a lot in pro play sometimes, but he can also peel with his W, so he can knock people away, and that is really helpful against if you're really good with that W against a lot of other engages. So like if Rakan's trying to go in, especially now that Rakan's engage is slower against an Alistar, there's a chance Alistar could just headbutt him out when he tries to W Q in, you know, on a priority target like your AD carry. You can just headbutt him out. Or, you know, Thresh hooks your whatever, your AD carry, you can headbutt him out. You know, Leona hooks your AD carry, you can headbutt him out. So that headbutt is also pretty good peel in addition to being used as an initiation. So he has really, really good roams too. You know, obviously with his with mobility boots, it's basically like you have a Rakan ult on a 10-second cooldown. You know, in a lot of situations, you just run up, sneak up on people, you know, WQ them. Very strong. So he is pretty good with Zeke's. He's all right. Knight's Vow, he's very good with Knight's Vow. And so, yeah, just a good roaming. Also, kind of like Zyra, and I mentioned, you know, before in terms of Zyra and a couple of these other supports, he can threaten people through the minion wave, so he doesn't have to hit a hook. Right, like he can just stand in front of the minion wave, and if they walk up to it, he does WQ combos, and boom, there's a fight. Now, they did nerf him recently. They took a lot of damage off of his E. But overall, he can still do that. So, you know, if you have a really aggressive early lane, like you've got a Lucian or, I don't know, it's almost always just Lucian, Kai'Sa, Ezreal, but really anybody. You know, you can just WQ, start the fight, even if they just throw a little poke in and it's not all in. That's good. He also has that passive heal as well, which, you know, heals him up through some poke in the laning phase. So, pretty good champion overall, pretty good, especially if you need some engage. You might see a lot more of him. He might end up being the #1 instead of Rakan, but I still think that Rakan is going to be somewhere in the top 5, at least for this patch. Okay, Tahm Kench is another one. Tahm Kench, like, lately has been, like, the quintessential pro pick special. He's just, like, god-awful in solo queue. You know, most of the time he's hovering around, like, a 40% win rate or something. Maybe not that low, but, like, 44. And that's just because everything he does just requires coordination. Like, especially his ult, which is one of his best parts. You know, you have to have someone that will actually take your ult, right? You have to have someone that can actually go in and just, like, click on you when you're trying to ult and teleport somewhere else. So it's a really good macro play, but... You know, in solo queue, you're trying to call down your jungler, say, hey, let's go gank bottom. I've got my ult. They never come. Or you're trying to rotate to a fight or whatever. and like just no one jumps in and you end up going by yourself and putting yourself in a bad position. You know, you eat your ally right when they're about to die, and they spit themselves back out and die anyways, and they rage at you. They say, I had that, man. I had that. Why did you eat me? You know, it just never ends with Rakan. It just requires so much coordination, but that's really good in pro play. He has really fast rotations. You have to constantly be scared of him. It makes it really hard for people to split push on you because you could just warp in behind him if you're hanging out in the mid lane. So he just controls a lot of the map, just like, you know, old school things like TF used to do it before he fell like really far out of the meta in pro play. And it's only like his ult's only on a 120-second cooldown. That's 2 minutes, and you can warp around. It's basically a teleport for 2. So super strong. And then, of course, you basically a Quicksilver Sash on a stick. You know, someone on your team gets CC'd or just gets in trouble. You just eat them, and then, you know, they're not going to spit themselves back out and die in pro play. They're going to, you know, let the support spit them out in a safe place. So I think that's really good. It's been very common in pro play to run something like Tahm, Kench, Ezreal. It's just like, you're never going to do anything to me. It's impossible. So I still think he'll end up being a good pick, even though he's been nerfed a million times. He still has his chomp. He still has his ult. He'll figure out a way around it. And then Thresh, like I mentioned before, you know, people can dodge hooks a lot in pro play, but people can also hit hooks really well in pro play. So Thresh does have a really hard time into a lot of these other tanks, but he is still nevertheless like a pretty good pick, especially because there aren't a ton of tanks in other roles right now most of the time, with the exception of like Galio mid lane. You're seeing some Sejuani jungle come back in, so there are some tanks, but usually there's at least 2 or 3 squishy champions that are pretty good hook targets. And even if you do hit a tank, you can just back up, you know, and aim for somebody else a little bit later, and then at least you get a little bit of harassment in there. Okay, last couple of champs here. Janna, she's still okay. She's just not proactive enough, I think, in this meta right now. We can revisit her once they buff the 80 carries. If champions like Jinx really become popular, maybe even Caitlyn, you might see more Janna, or like hard engaged tanks, like Zac and things like that. Janna's very good against that. So we'll see. If assassins start to fall out of the meta and there's a lot more tanks running around, Janna might come back and be a bit stronger. Zillion, it's okay. Speeds people up. Decent anti-assassin. I just think that he's a little too unreliable. Like, you have to hit those double bombs. I don't know. He's okay. I feel like there are better choices. Lulu is somebody who's starting to come back, and I think that she will come back a bit more if the 80 carries get stronger over the next couple of patches. And she's very good with Vayne, I think, because you can add that whimsy in there. It's kind of the similar concept to what I talked about with Nami. It gives her a ton of movement speed, ton of attack speed, and you have your ult to protect her from assassins. So, and because she's attacking so fast, if you put the shield on her, the E, then she's going to do a lot of extra damage with picks. So if you're against like a tank lane for some reason in solo queue, which isn't happening a lot these days, but if they don't have a lot of poke and you have a Lulu, I do think that Lulu Vayne could be a thing. I could even potentially see something like that in pro play. I don't know if they'll actually do that, but that is a pretty good combination there. Or if Kog'Maw ever comes back, which he's so far out of the meta, I don't think that's happening. But like Lulu Vayne can be very strong. And then Fiddlesticks is somebody else that I haven't really played a lot consistently lately, but he does have really nice harass with his E. His fear is excellent. So if they have a lot of short-range champions, you know, a lot of like Riven, Jax, Fiora, Camille, like that type of stuff that's like kind of squishy, but it's kind of short range, the fighter type of champs, then I think Fiddlesticks is excellent. Now, if they get Quicksilver Sash, it just basically ruins your day. But he can be good. He's got really high base damages on his ult. He's one of the few AP champs that can actually start fights as well, like really reliably, just like jumping over a wall and then just fear somebody, boom, the fight started. So it's possible I should be playing more Fiddle, but you know, he's definitely worth consideration. He can be strong. Now, some of these other champs here that people have asked me about, Ornn I get asked about a lot. You know, we have seen that some in pro play. It's usually really bad. He's 0-4 this week. I know that last week, like, Lahens played him, and like won a game with him, I think, maybe 2 games. But it's just rough. I did play him in a normal game for a donation, and it was pretty fun. I mean, you can get 3 points of Q and harass a little bit. Your E does knock people up. It is cool that you can build, like, upgrade your gold item in the lane, and that you can, you know, if you're running low on mana or running low on health, you know, you can build some crystals in the laning phase. You don't have to back. And that does give you some extra experience, right? If you don't have to leave the lane, other people leave sometime before level 6, you're going to hit 6 first. And so, you know, the fact that you have your inventory there is excellent. You have to go back eventually for wards, but it does allow you to get extra experience, and it does allow you to get a little bit extra gold, too, when you're just last hitting there while you're waiting on your 80 carry to come back to lane. But I mean, his main problem is he doesn't CC for as long as he used to with his ult. His like Q and his E are somewhat conditional. And just takes forever to get to level, you know, 13, 14, 15, so you can give people those free upgrades. He has a long cooldown ult, so that's not great for Zeke's. He does do really high base damage just because most of his damage is based on brittle now, so that is good. I just feel like he's kind of squishy for someone who's tanky. Like, if you engage on him, you can definitely blow him up. I just feel like everything just requires too much prep and setup, you know? You got to hit your Q, then you got to E into him, you got to ult, and then, you know, it's just like, if you do this, then you do this. Like, it's just too much setup. Like, it's just so much more than just, okay, I'm Nami, I'm going to walk up and W you and auto-attack you until you leave the lane. You know, basically, so he's okay. It just requires a lot of setup, and I think he's just too squishy. They did buff some of his stats, but I think he needs that shield back off of his W. But anyways, he's okay. I guess he has a really low win rate. Yeah, he's got a 47% win rate. I mean, to be fair, that's about the same as Rakan's, but he's probably mildly viable. If you want to play him, you can probably get away with it, but I think there are almost certainly going to be better options in most situations. Okay. The other champs people ask me about. I keep having people ask me about Ashe for some reason. Just don't play Ashe support. Like, the items just don't make any sense. You know, you have to get something like Black Cleaver. It just seems really bad. Just don't do it. Gragas support can be okay. We have seen that some. I mean, his belly slam, like his E can stop a lot of movement, like Jarvan flags, Zac engages, Rakan engages, that type of stuff. So he does have that potential, but his W is basically just doesn't do anything as a support. His barrel roll is okay, but it's really slow. His ult is very cool and very good as a support. But it's basically like your E and your ult are kind of your total identity. I don't think, yeah, he was picked 4 times. Looks like he went 1 and 3. So he's all right. I've tried him. It is kind of cool. It is very satisfying when you land the barrel, but, you know, probably better options out there. People were asking about Ori support last night. Ori just doesn't have enough CC, and she just requires too much mana. Like, her W is, like, super expensive for what it is. You know, level 3, it's like 90 mana to do 150 damage, and that's just not enough. I had people tell me, well, like, her shield's good, though, right? It's like, sort of. You got to keep in mind this has a travel time, right? So if you know, QW to harass somebody, then you try to go put your shield on someone else who's about to take damage, has a delay. Like a Janna shield works instantly, right? But the ball has to physically go over there to shield him. So it's going to have like a 1 or 2 second delay, which can be really bad in some circumstances. Yes, the shield is better, you know, than a Janna shield on paper by like 10. But it has less scaling. Janna's has a 0.7 scaling. This only has a 0.4 scaling. So I don't know what the number is, but basically if you have something like 50 AP, then it's going to be more probably on the Janna shield. And then it only lasts for 2.5 seconds, so it does not last very long. That's about the same amount of time. That is the same amount of time as a Lulu shield. So it's okay. It does give you extra armor and magic resist, and that is significant. That's a very big deal. So this is cool. Like, I could see this working. It's got a 9-second cooldown. It's cheap. So it's not, like, super spammable, but, you know, you could move it around some. So I could see that being useful. This is a short cooldown. Like, this is a really cool ability. So I think that stuff could work. She just doesn't have the stat line for it right now, and she just needs, like, a little bit more if they want to make her a support. I'd be fine with her being a support. There's so many other control mages that, like, do what Orianna used to do. Most notably Galio, which is, like, you know, follow up CC for someone who's hard engaging, or he used to just put the ball on Jarvan, you know, or like Rengar or something, and they would just jump in, and then she would, you know, blow them up. Now it's pretty much like Rakan jumps in and Galio jumps on top of them, right? So Galio has kind of supplanted what she does. I think she has kind of bad matchups into things like Zoe and maybe Cassiopeia. I'm not sure. She might have a favorable matchup on Cassiopeia. I don't know, but it just feels like you just almost never see her anymore. She's really slow, like 325. She has low base mana, which we talked about earlier. She only has 0.8. Low auto attack range for a support. For a range support. Zyra's got like 525. Nami. I think Janna does too now. Has like 550. Which you wouldn't think 50 matters. It matters. So yeah. She's okay. Sylas, I haven't seen Sylas as a support yet. I saw him as a jungler. Wasn't super impressed. He did have a decent stat line, but it just felt like he didn't do anything a lot of the time. Like, I don't know. I was playing Rakan, too. Everyone in the chat's like, oh, my God. You know, they counterpicked you so hard. You picked Rakan. They picked Sylas. He's going to steal your ult. It's like, okay. I don't know. I just, like, maybe I just haven't seen enough of him, or maybe people just aren't good on him yet. Like, obviously, his ult is cool. Like, you can dodge and throw hooks, and that's cool. It just felt like it was pretty easy to dodge almost everything. This has a long range, by the way. Like, it feels like this is like 1,000 range. It's a skill shot to hit somebody to take their ult. I think. It might be a point click, but it looked like it was a skill shot. It was a really long range. So, like, he could work. I could see it work. I would just need more data. The first time I saw him, like I said, he was in the jungle, and I just wasn't that impressed. Like, it just felt like everything was really easy to dodge or easy to get away from. Like, these chains. He just didn't have a lot of ways to just lock people down, is what it felt like. I was playing Rakan, but I was just, like, just zipping circles around him. So I think in certain situations, especially if they have really good ults, you know, if they have, like, a Rakan ult or a Karthus ult or an Amumu ult or a Kennen ult or something like that, then he could be really good. But if it's just a bunch of stuff like Caitlyn, Zoe, Udyr, you know, that type of stuff, then he's going to be really bad. So we'll see. You know, I don't want to put him on the list just yet. You could try him out. I just think people aren't going to be that great on him. Like I said, I'm not super impressed with what he has going on. I think he's probably would be better as like maybe a top laner. But I think he's just going to be a counter pick primarily. If they have really good ults or like in very specific matchups. Who else did I get asked about? I think that's about it. It's about an hour, so I won't go too much more into it. I think I covered most champs that are like pretty popular that people ask about a lot. Also, I know that Nasty is like done like a Zac support thing. I'll have to look that up more. I really don't think it's going to be that great. I don't know. I'll have to study that more to see, but it just feels like the numbers aren't there, and just the itemization is not going to be there if you don't have Cinder Hulk. I mean, I guess you can get, I don't even know. Like, you'd obviously want to get to the Warmog threshold. Guess you could go Eye of the Equinox plus Knight's Vow and then maybe Warmogs or something. I don't know. I'll have to research it more. My immediate instinct is, like, probably not that great. Depends on the matchup. Definitely not great into something like Thresh, who can, like, flay him out of his ult. But there could be some circumstances where he'd be all right. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned. I will have the 80 carry tier list either today or tomorrow, and then I'm going to, you know, continue to release for each other tier as well. So have a good day. I'll see you next time.